I saw the nameplate just as the string quartet began tuning. Gold border, thick cardstock, same as the others, except mine had a second line, a handwritten edition. Marlon Dovey, low-educated fake mom. I stopped walking. I didn't need to sit, to feel small. The handwriting was neat, intentional, like someone had taken their time, looped each letter, pressed hard enough that the ink shimmered under the light. I blinked once, then twice, and the words didn't go away. I could hear them before I saw them, the soft snickering, the not-so-subtle gasps from the bride's side of the table. One of her cousins leaned in to show another guest. Someone pulled out a phone. I felt the blood rise behind my ears. My fingers curled slightly around my clutch, then unclenched. I stepped forward, flipped the card face down, and tried to keep my face still. That's when I heard him. Mom. His voice was closer than I expected. I turned and saw Jonah standing just a few feet away. He wasn't smiling. His fists were clenched at his sides. He stepped around me and picked up the card I'd turned over. Read it out loud. Low-educated fake mom, he said slowly. Loud enough for the laughter to stop, loud enough for heads to turn. No one moved. The band faded into silence. Even the waitstaff froze. This wedding is over, Jonah said calmly. There was a pause and then confusion. Murmurs, chairs creaked. The bride stood across the room, her expression frozen in something between embarrassment and disbelief. Her mother opened her mouth but didn't speak. Jonah looked at me. Come on, Mom. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I placed my hand on his arm, and together we walked past the linen-covered tables, past the champagne flutes, past the awkward stares of people who had once smiled at me in rehearsal dinners and gift registry lines. We walked out through the tall glass doors as someone called his name. He didn't look back. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees as we stepped into the parking lot. He let out a slow breath but said nothing. I opened the passenger door, sat down, and closed it gently. By the time we reached the car, the silence behind us was deeper than any applause. I knew I wasn't part of the inner circle the moment they started calling it her wedding instead of their day. Jonah always softened it with a smile. Stephanie's been dreaming about this since she was 10. Mom, I'm just here to make it real. I didn't argue. I'd spent years choosing silence over conflict. The first time I offered to help, I suggested baking cookies for the welcome bags. Stephanie smiled politely and said, That's sweet, but we've hired a specialty vendor. We wanted elegant. She said that word a lot, elegant. It always meant not homemade, not personal, not me. When I asked about attending the cake tasting, she blinked and said, Oh, didn't Jonah tell you we already did that last week? That last? When I asked about the florist meeting, it was the same. It just happened so fast. You know how the schedule's been. I didn't push. I just waited for a moment that never came. Eventually, they started giving me small tasks, practical things. Could I pick up the monogrammed candles from the print shop? Could I help box up the party favors? Could I confirm the Airbnb for out of town? Cousins? I said yes to everything. Not because I didn't notice, but because I did. I noticed everything. I saw how Stephanie's mother was listed as hostess on the invitations, even though I'd written a check to cover half the rehearsal dinner. I saw how I wasn't included in the family group photo plans. They sent me a separate email with my own time slot 10 minutes before guests arrived. There was no malice in their tone. That's what made it worse. It wasn't cruelty. It was erasure. Like I'd been filed under miscellaneous, useful, but not central. Jonah didn't see it, or maybe he chose not to. Whenever I brought it up, he'd say, You know how Steph gets with details? He'd rub the back of his neck and look away. By the week of the wedding, I'd stopped offering. I just showed up, smiled when expected, delivered what I was asked to, and tried not to count how many things I was never invited to do. And yet, somehow, I still thought I belonged at that table. I hadn't even sat down when I heard it. "She used to clean classrooms, right?" The voice came from behind me, light and careless, like someone commenting on the weather. Another voice, lower, amused, responded almost instantly. "Well, she looks the part." I froze for half a second. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I just kept my eyes on the table, my hand still resting on the back of the chair I hadn't dared pull out. They weren't whispering. That was the part that cut the deepest. They wanted me to hear it. They knew exactly who I was and said it anyway. I stood still, pretending to adjust the strap of my purse. Someone on the bride's side chuckled. Another clinked their glass too hard. A breeze drifted in through the open French doors, but it didn't cool anything. Then I noticed one of the bridesmaids, tall hair piled high, raise her phone and aim it toward the table, toward me. She grinned, whispered something to the woman next to her, and filmed. I couldn't be sure what she caught, but I knew what they wanted. They wanted the moment the fake mom discovered her label. They wanted a reaction. Behind me, someone said, "She's not even wearing what we told guests to wear. Look at that color, that fabric." I hadn't gotten the dress code memo. Apparently, no one had sent it to me. Across the room, I saw Jonah. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smiling. He stood with one hand in his pocket, the other loosely holding a glass. His eyes were locked on the table, on me. His jaw was tight, his shoulders square, and I could see the muscle twitch just beneath his cheek. For a moment, I wondered if he'd say anything, if he'd walk across the room and wrap his arm around me, but he didn't move. I sat down slowly, smoothing the skirt of my dress, pretending not to notice the stares, pretending not to care. It wasn't until the string quartet started tuning again that I let myself look down and saw the nameplate for the first time. I didn't mean to touch the card. I'd already seen enough, heard enough, but my hand moved anyway. I slid it toward me, turned it over, and read the words again. Not because I needed confirmation, but because I wanted to be sure I'd never forget. Low-educated fake mom. The ink glinted beneath the chandelier light. I blinked slowly, willing myself not to react. No tears, no scenes, just silence. That's when Jonah appeared beside me. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, one hand on the back of my chair, the other steady at his side. His suit jacket was half unbuttoned, his face pale but sure. He reached down and picked up the card, turned it toward himself, and read it. "Low-educated fake mom," he said clearly, his voice level but loud enough to cut through the hum of silverware and conversations. All at once, the room hushed. A ripple of tension moved across the table. Champagne flutes froze mid-air. Someone gasped audibly. I heard a fork drop. Jonah didn't look at them. He looked at me. "Mom," he said, and this time his voice cracked just slightly. "We're leaving." I hesitated just for a moment, not because I disagreed, but because it felt like a scene from someone else's life. Not mine, not the quiet woman who packed school lunches and cleaned chalkboards. But Jonah didn't flinch. He reached for my hand, and I gave it to him. We turned together. A murmur broke out behind us. I didn't look to see who stood or who stared, but I heard the orchestra stop. I heard the wedding planner whisper something into a headset. I heard someone ask, "Is this part of the schedule?" As we passed the bride, she reached out toward Jonah. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He didn't stop, didn't blink, walking, away from people who mock the only parent I ever had. And just like that, we kept walking through the archway, past the photographer, past the stunned servers holding silver trays. By the time we stepped outside, the sun had shifted and the laughter behind us had finally gone quiet. By the time we reached the edge of the parking lot, someone had already posted about it. I didn't need to see the screen to know. The way people stared, the way a bridesmaid ran out with her phone still recording, it was happening in real time. A headline before dessert. We didn't talk. Jonah unlocked the car and opened the passenger door. I slid in, still holding my purse too tightly. He started the engine, turned off the radio, and pulled out without a word. The venue slipped away behind us, just another building in the mirror. 10 minutes later, we pulled into a quiet cafe, off the lake road, the kind of place with chipped wooden tables and handwritten menus taped to the counter. Jonah ordered 2 coffees, black, no cream. He didn't ask if I wanted anything else. I didn't ask either. We sat outside overlooking the water. It shimmered under the late sun, a few boats bobbing gently in the distance. Neither of us spoke. The coffee was hot and slightly bitter, just how I liked it. I could feel him beside me, still breathing slowly, hands around the cup, like it grounded him. I wanted to say something to thank him, maybe, but I didn't want to make it about me, not yet. He finally broke the silence. They never wanted me, just what I looked like on paper. I didn't correct him. I knew he was right. That family had always seen him as potential, not person. And me, I wasn't even part of the equation, just background noise they never expected to hear speak. The planner texted me, he added. She asked if I was coming back. I said no. He didn't sound angry, just tired. My hand brushed his. He didn't pull away. We stayed like that for a long time, watching the lake shift under the wind. Behind us, I imagined the cake untouched, the champagne, flat, the music never played, chairs being stacked, bills being questioned, parents pacing, and in front of me, my son. Quiet, steady, and finally, choosing the one person who never asked him to prove anything. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't scroll through headlines or messages. I just stood in my kitchen, made a pot of strong coffee, and watched the steam rise as if it had somewhere more important to be. My name wasn't trending, but the bride's was. I didn't need to look to know the footage had spread. There'd been too many phones, too many whispers. I wasn't the one people came to see, but I was the one they remembered. I sipped my coffee and pulled out the file box from the hall closet. It was old, indented, labeled in Sharpie Dovey Holdings. Inside were copies of every trust document, every property deed, every signed rental agreement I'd ever handled myself. The wedding fund had come from the sale of a lakeside duplex I bought 15 years ago with overtime money. I'd never told Jonah how much it sold for. I didn't need praise, but I knew how it had helped cover the venue deposit, the catering advance, the designer suit fittings his bride had insisted on. One by one, I pulled out the receipts and logged into the accounts. Venue balance unpaid. Catering final charge declined. Florist, music, rehearsal dinner all reversed. The planner had used my card for every major reservation because I'd offered, not because they asked. Now I was simply unoffering. I left a short voicemail for the venue coordinator. Due to a cancellation, please remove me from all remaining. Vendor obligations. Any deposits may be retained at your discretion. Then, I turned to the condo. It was a 2-bedroom near Canal Park, recently remodeled. Jonah and Stephanie had planned to move in next month. What she didn't know, what Jonah never needed to know, was that the lease had never been finalized. The keys were still in my drawer. I emailed the agent, hold listing, no move in. There were no explanations, no bitterness, just clean lines. I closed the file box and made another cup of coffee, stronger this time. Jonah would be arriving soon. He'd asked if we could talk. The message came in just after 9 while Jonah and I were still at the kitchen table. The second pot of coffee was half finished. We hadn't said much since he arrived, just quiet updates, the kind you offer when everything else feels too loud. He glanced at his phone, brows lifting slightly. Then he handed it to me. Thought you should see this. It's from Emily, one of Stephanie's bridesmaids. The video started with laughter, sharp, casual, unguarded. I recognized the setting immediately, the head table an hour before the ceremony. Emily's camera wasn't steady, but the faces were clear. Stephanie's mother stood in front of the seating cards, holding a gold pen. "Let's give her a little title," she said, grinning. Then she wrote it. Low, educated, fake mom. Stephanie leaned over her shoulder, read it out loud, and then burst out laughing. "Perfect. That'll make a few people blink." I didn't react. I just watched. Off to the side, barely in frame, Jonah stood still, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt, just observed, his mouth a hard line. The video ended. I set the phone down slowly. He stared at the table. When he spoke, it was quiet. I saw her write it. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe it was a joke, or maybe they'd changed their mind. He ran a hand through his hair. I was trying to keep peace. I thought if I just kept quiet, they'd realize it was wrong. I didn't. "Say anything. I should have stopped it sooner," he said. He picked up the phone again and opened a message thread. His lawyer's name was at the top. He attached the video and typed, "For the record, prenup discussion back on hold." He didn't explain what that meant, and I didn't ask. We sat in silence again, but it felt different now, heavier, sharper. When he looked up at me, his eyes were clear. "I'm not marrying someone who thinks mocking you is funny." I nodded, reaching for my mug, and took a slow sip just as the doorbell rang. I met with my attorney the following week. We sat across from each other in a quiet office downtown, the same one where I'd signed the original property trust years ago. Back then, I'd barely understood what half the clauses meant. I just knew I wanted Jonah to have something that didn't come with strings. Now I was back, not to take anything away from him, but to add something bigger. "I want to amend the will," I said. She clicked her pen and nodded. "Of course. What are you thinking?" I pulled a sheet of paper from my purse, unfolded it, and laid it flat. I'd written the words the night after Jonah sent the video, after the shock had settled and something else had taken its place. "The Dovey Fund," I said. "A scholarship for kids of custodians, janitors, school lunch workers, people like me." She smiled, and I kept going. "It doesn't have to be huge, but I want the first round to start next fall. Trade school, college, community programs, whatever path they choose. Not everyone has a mother with a title, but they deserve a future." We reviewed the documents together. I allocated a portion of the trust, enough to sustain 5 full scholarships per year, plus stipends for books and housing. I'd set aside more than I thought. Quiet years of saving, careful moves, no designer handbags, no fancy cars, just a small portfolio built on long days and modest choices. Jonah would still inherit the properties, but now so would others, at least in spirit. When the papers were ready, I signed. "Do you want to notify your son of the change?" my attorney asked. I shook my head. "He'll find out when the letters go, out next spring. He doesn't need to know today." That night, I went home and printed a new copy of the trust. I slid it into a fresh folder, labeled it by hand, and placed it back into the box in the closet. I slept well for the first time in weeks, knowing that the next time someone tried to write over my name, there'd be something stronger beneath: the ink. The envelope came in pale pink with gold foil edges, as if pretty paper could soften what it held. I opened it carefully, not because I was curious, but because I already knew what was inside. A letter typed, formal, signed in blue ink. "We deeply regret the misunderstanding. We had no idea the nameplate would cause offense. Please understand, it was never intended to hurt anyone. We hope in time you and Jonah can find peace with how the day unfolded." It was signed Victoria Allen Hughes, not Stephanie's mother, not with warmth or with sincerity, just a name typed neatly under a closing sentence. I folded it back into thirds and slid it aside. Later that afternoon, Jonah got a message. He held up his phone so I could read it. "Can we talk, Stephanie?" Short and direct, no context, just 3 words. Jonah didn't respond, He looked at me unsure. I gave a small nod. Not approval, just acknowledgement. I went to my bedroom and pulled out the photo I'd taken of the nameplate that day. I hadn't meant to save it. I'd snapped it quickly, instinctively, before flipping the card over in front of the crowd. Somehow, I knew I'd need to remember what it looked like in the moment. Not because it hurt, but because it taught me something. I printed the photo, slipped it into a plain envelope, and added a small note beneath it. Mothers don't need titles, but they never forget the ones you gave them. I addressed it to Stephanie. No return address. Jonah asked if I wanted him to send it. I nodded. No explanation, he asked. That was the explanation, I said. We didn't discuss it again. He didn't say whether she replied, and I didn't ask. Whatever conversation they'd had, if they had, it was between them now. What mattered to me had already been said, and more importantly, done. The next morning, I got an email from the school district. They'd reviewed the Dovey Fund application for partnership. The board had voted unanimously. 1 year later, I stood at the front of a middle school auditorium holding a stack of cream-colored envelopes. Each one had a name printed in bold letters, sealed with a simple green stamp. The Dovey Fund. 5. Students sat in the front row, nervously adjusting their sleeves, smoothing out their shirts. Their parents watched from folding chairs set up in neat rows. Custodians, lunch workers, crossing guards. A few I recognized from my own years in the district. We nodded at each other in quiet understanding. When I called their names, one by one, they came forward. No speeches, no stage lights, just applause, a handshake, and a check with their future written on it. Jonah stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, watching it all with a quiet smile. After the ceremony, he helped me stack chairs and hand out bottled water. He never missed a scholarship event, not one. He called it his reset. We went for lunch afterward, like always, same diner, same booth near the window. He paid without asking, and I let him. That was our rhythm now, unspoken and easy. On the way home, we took the long route. The road curved around the lake and past the old venue, the one with the chandeliers and arched windows. It looked smaller than I remembered. A wedding was happening inside, someone else's turn. Now, guests milled around the front steps, laughing, fixing their hair, lifting their glasses. The music carried faintly on the breeze. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. Jonah slowed the car just a little. I rested my hand on the window and smiled. Let's keep going, I said. He nodded, eyes forward. No bitterness, no weight, just distance. That day had once tried to define me in a single line in gold ink on a piece of folded cardstock. But I'd rewritten it in ways they never saw coming, in scholarships, in quiet choices, in the strength of walking out instead of staying seated. As the lake shimmered beside us and the venue disappeared in the mirror, I thought they never got their wedding, but I got my name back.